Hey, I didn't even see you come in. Well, I'm going to tell you a little tip. Every great athlete out there knows you got to stay loose, limber, and flexible. And one of the best ways you can do that is with some nice stretching. Really got to work on those extensions. They're not just for hair and computer programs, you know. Alright everyone, howdy, how y'all doing? Today I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do with chord extensions. I'll be doing it based on two patterns. One, a 1-5-4 minor 6 pattern. It'll sound something like this. And I'm playing this in G, so that's G. So that's G, D, C, and E minor. The other pattern will be a 1-4-5 minor 6. So it'll sound a little something like this. And so that goes G, C, D, E minor. And as you can see, one has kind of a climbing feel, the other is a little bit more of a falling feel. One of the things you'll notice whenever you're writing is as much as the chords, the leads, the instruments you put in affect the feel of the song, the progression is really going to drive how the song feels. So the first thing you can do is you can look at the natural sevenths in the key. In the key of G, the natural seventh for G is going to add an F sharp and make it a G major seventh. It'll sound like this. Now the D will be a dominant 7. It's going to add a C and sound like this. The C will be a major 7th, similar to the G, adding a B and sound something like this. And the E minor will be a dominant 7th and add a D, sounding like this. So if you played them together in the first pattern, it would sound a little bit like this. Now that sounds kind of cool. I like it. It's not something I would do all the time, but it really does give more color to the normal progression. Now one of the things I like to do is actually take my tonic chords, so in this case it would be the G and the E minor, and not change them, and so just use the extensions on anything that's not a tonic chord. So if I'm doing that and keeping the natural sevenths, it would sound like this. And I like doing that because I think it adds a little bit of power. There's a central and a home. Your tonic doesn't change. Everything around it gives a little bit more color. One thing that's really kind of neat you can do, especially if you're working with a suspended chord, a sus4, a sus2, something like this. You see this a lot with an A major. You can actually resolve a chord to itself. So A major would be here, but A sus2 would be this with a B in it. And so if you're playing an A major chord pattern, maybe you're going from A to E. It's not the strongest of cadences, it's not the strongest end, but it does give you a kind of a feeling like you're lifted into the home location. So there's a lot you can do without having to do a dominant to a tonic chord, you can actually play around with the extensions to create your own resolutions. Now, another thing you can do is you can take all dominant seventh chords. For G, it would sound something like this. In the first pattern, now I kind of like that, it has some bite to it, but the dominant seventh, which actually for the G would signify that it's in mixolydian mode, I think it feels better when you're building up with it. So going to the second pattern that I was using normally would sound something like it sounds a little cheesy in the end, just kind of doesn't really feel that strong. But if you put it in sevenths, it's a lot more powerful. And I think what you can do with those dominant sevenths is just put them in blues, put them in country, put them in rock, and it really just drives the style of your song exactly where you want it to go. Now, let's try that same pattern except using the tonics with no extensions on them. That's really where I feel home, but again, it's all about whatever kind of music you want to make. So mess around with the extensions, see what you can do with them, see what you like about them, and find really what drives you. Now, one of the things you can also do, and you'll see this written a lot, there's a 9 chord and there's an add 9 chord. The main difference, a 9 chord is going to have the 7th note in it. So a G7, dominant 7 will have an F, a flatted 7th. The 9 chord will have, you get the G, and then above that 2 is going to be an A. A 9 is always going to be 2 above your tonic. It's the same thing as a 2, except the 9th note is going to be after you've reached an octave in your chord. So a 9th chord would be a G7 with an A on top of it. An add 9 chord is not necessarily going to have that 7th note in it. It would be a G chord with an A in it, but you won't necessarily have the F. Now, one of the things you can do with some of these chords is, especially in the key of G, and this is kind of why I chose it, if you play the C add 9, and the C add 9 is just going to add a D, your ring finger can actually play a D on this second string here in the key of G, in the G chord, because the D is already in there. So you can actually keep your hand in the same position, move up, and now you're playing a C add 9. And you can tell there's not that hard dominant 7th in there. It's more of a soft sound. So going from G to C add 9, then you can get into a D, and if you keep your pinky on this 3rd fret, you're at a G. Well, the D chord is D, F sharp, A. So if you play a G instead of the F sharp, there's no F sharp, you're actually playing a D sus4. So this is a progression a lot of people will use. A lot of people have probably already played it, and you may not know that you're playing extensions, but it sounds like this. And you can end it on the E minor, and that's pretty much why I chose the key of G, because in E minor, this G is already a note that exists, and this D just makes it the dominant 7th. So really you're playing a tonic, an add 9, a suspended 4th, which is suspended up instead of down, and a dominant 7th. That's really all chord extensions are. And so you can use them if you want to put the hard sevenths on there, the dominant sevenths, and create a bluesy country rock feel. If you want to do more of a folk rock or an indie folk or some sort of like coffee house type music, you might want to play more of the add nines and the suspended chords. But you can really take all these chords together, blend them how you want, determine how do you like to do your tonics, how do you like your dominants. Maybe you always want your dominant to be the chord with no extensions in it. Now the last type of chord that I really want to talk about is a 6 chord. And a 6 chord is kind of special because a major 6 chord is going to be the relative minor's dominant 7th. A G6 is going to be G, B, D, that's your 1, 3, and 5. The 6th for G is going to add an E to it. If you take E, then go back to the 1, G, B, and you add the D on it, that's going to actually give you the dominant 7th for E minor. So you really do see why the relative minor is considered a tonic, because a G6 and an E minor 7th are the same thing. They can perform the same functions. I think they sound pretty cool. So this is going to be the G6, and all I'm doing is giving an E at the end instead of playing that G. And it just kind of has an airy feeling to it. So I can do something like that. And just playing that E, not only is it a drone note, which is a really cool concept, but now I'm playing a G6, I'm playing a C add 9, and then when I get to D, I'm putting an E at the end of it, which is going to be a D suspended 2. So earlier I was playing a D suspended 4, now I'm playing it 2, and then if I go back to E minor, even if I play the 7th, that high E is going to ring. So it gives you the ability to do a drone tone, and I just think it kind of sounds cool. So play around with all these different kind of chords and really just find the ones that fit the style you want to make. Well, I hope you enjoyed my first video on creating some style with your songwriting. Going over extensions is going to be a big benefit to anybody who's really trying to break out from the pack and not just play the same thing that everybody else is playing. So go out there, mess around with it, and write something killer. And as always, follow the music, own the show. B-Row out.